There's a quiet moment many women reach somewhere in midlife. It usually happens on an ordinary day. Nothing dramatic, nothing obvious. You're sitting with a planner or a to do list, or maybe just thinking about everything you want to change in your life. And suddenly you notice something that's a little unsettling. The motivation you used to rely on just isn't showing up the way it used to. You still care about your life. You still have ideas about what you want to build or change or even improve. But the energy that used to carry you forward now feels different, heavier, lower. Sometimes it feels like you're pushing yourself uphill just to start. And when that happens, a lot of women quietly start telling themselves something that isn't actually true. They think they've lost their drive. But that's barely the real story. There was a time when I believed motivation was the key to everything. If I wanted to change something in my life, I would sit down with a planner, make a list, and feel energized just looking at all the possibilities. I loved that feeling of momentum, but I started noticing something over time. The excitement would carry me through the first few days, sometimes the first few weeks, and then slowly the energy would fade. The list was still there, the goals were still there, but the motivation I expected to carry me forward just wasn't showing up anymore. At first, I assumed that meant something was wrong with me. Maybe I needed to push harder. Maybe I needed more discipline. Maybe I just needed to find the right motivational trick. But eventually, I realized something much simpler. Motivation was never designed to carry the whole journey. Motivation is powerful, but motivation is temporary. It shows up when we feel inspired or excited or even hopeful about a new direction. But it naturally fades when life gets busy, when stress increases, or when uncertainty creeps in. And when we're younger, motivation often feels easier to access. Life itself provides structure. There are schedules, routines, responsibilities that shape our days. But midlife changes that structure in ways we don't always notice at first. Children grow up, careers shift, priorities change, and suddenly the systems that once organized our life are no longer doing that job. When that happens, many women unknowingly try to replace structure with motivation. They think if they can just feel motivated enough, everything will fall back into place. But motivation isn't built to replace structure. Motivation is the spark. Structure is the system that keeps the fire going. When life depends on motivation, every step forward becomes a negotiation. You wake up and ask yourself, do I feel like doing this today? Do I have the energy? Should I start tomorrow instead? Every decision requires effort, and those small decisions slowly drain the mental energy throughout the day. But when structure exists, the experience changes completely. You don't have to debate every step. You already know where to begin. You know what comes next. Structure removes the friction, and removing friction is often the real key to progress, especially in midlife. Because midlife is rarely about pushing harder, it's about simplifying. Think about how much pressure women carry during this stage of life. There are expectations about health, expectations about productivity, expectations about finances and family and relationships and even personal growth. And many of those expectations exist quietly in the background. They show up as a feeling that you should be doing more or that you should have things more figured out by now. When that pressure builds, motivation becomes even harder to access because the brain associates progress with stress. But structure changes the emotional experience of progress. Instead of trying to tackle everything, you start with one clear step. Just one. That single step removes a surprising amount of pressure. Motivation feels powerful when it shows up, but it's never meant to carry your entire life forward. Motivation is the spark that starts movement. Structure is what keeps movement going. And when motivation fades, it doesn't mean something is wrong. It usually means your life is ready for a better structure. Many women believe they've lost their drive in midlife, but most of the time that isn't what happened. What usually changed was the structure around them. The systems that once organized life disappeared. And without realizing it, they began expecting motivation to replace structure. That's a job motivation was never designed to do. One small shift can reduce an incredible amount of pressure. Instead of asking yourself, how do I stay motivated today? Ask a different question. What is the next step? Just one step. Clarity removes friction, and friction is what often drains motivation in the first place. One of the quiet advantages of midlife is perspective. You begin to see patterns that were invisible before. You start recognizing which strategies actually helped you move forward and which ones only created pressure. And many women eventually realize something important. The path forward rarely requires more force. It requires more clarity, letting go of expectations that no longer fit, simplifying systems, building structures that support the person you are today, not the person you were 20 years ago. And when structure supports your life, motivation becomes something very different. It stops being something you chase, and it becomes something that returns naturally because clarity reduces resistance, and when resistance drops, progress becomes possible again. If motivation feels harder to access right now, it may not be a problem. It may simply be a signal that life is ready for something more sustainable, something simpler, something clearer. Instead of asking yourself how to stay motivated all the time, you might start asking a different question. What structure would make this easier? Because when the right structure exists, progress stops feeling like constant pressure and begins to feel steady again. Progress doesn't come from pressure, it comes from clarity.